Hi, Govin here. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that you're listening to a special edition of Paper Napkin Wisdom, the Freedom Framework series built around a new book by Michael Walsh. In this series, Michael and I explore what it really takes to build a business that works for you, not the other way around. We're talking about freedom in your business, freedom from your business, and freedom because of your business. We'll talk about what each of those things mean. Each episode brings you tools, insights, and in-depth conversation between Michael and I about how to bring this kind of freedom into your life. If you're ready to design a business that you don't need to escape from, you're in the right place. Listen in.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govin Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govin Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, where small ideas turn into big results. This is episode 277, which is part 13 of our Freedom by Design series with my friend and perennial fan favorite, Michael Walsh, strategist, teacher, and founder of Walsh Business Growth. Today, Michael brings a sketch that quietly rewires how you think about management. As you listen, you'll start to notice the difference between doing the work and creating the conditions where the work gets done at scale. It's the kind of napkin that seems obvious until you realize what it means for your calendar, your one-on-ones, and the way your team actually produces results. If you've ever promoted a star and wondered why growth didn't accelerate, or if you felt the weight of outcomes resting on only your shoulders, this conversation is going to open a door. As you consider your own team, you might begin to see where leverage lives and how a subtle shift in focus can multiply outcomes without burning you out. So grab a pen and paper, listen for the moment where a single line changes how you manage, and let that guide how you lead this week. Let's listen in. Michael Walsh, welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom. The series continues, and we had a spirited conversation about good bosses and bad bosses in our last conversation, in our last napkin. And you know what I thought was really crazy? You shared some numbers around the percentages of how many people think that they're either good or bad, or in this case, how many people thought they were good. They were striking. What were those numbers again?
71%, according to Gallup, 71% of all managers put themselves in the top 20% of all managers. And Gallup further says that only about 10% of all managers are actually good at their job. They're like really great at their job. So if 10% of all managers are great, and 71% of all people who are in management put themselves in the top 20% of all managers, clearly there's some disconnects. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So people just don't know whether or not they're good or not. And most people, well, are just not as good as they think they are.
Well, and the thing is that they've been trained in management through osmosis based on the 20th century model. 20th century model basically said, run your business, like a well-oiled machine. And as a result, people become cogs in a system.
Yeah. And I think that the word itself is a little broken, right? This idea that you're managing people is to say that you're controlling them in some way. And that's not really what makes for a great team.
Well, I don't know. Nobody wants to be controlled.
Right. But the word itself suggests that.
Yeah, the word itself totally suggests that.
Right. So how do we break free of the mold and grow our managers?
Well, here's the thing. So let's take a step back.
That's shocking that you'd want to take a step back.
Only on days that end in Y.
Exactly.
Because here's the, if you remember, how do people get to where they're at? Okay. They excelled as an individual contributor, and the boss said, I trust this person more than others. And as a result, I'm going to make this person the manager. because if I trust them as an individual contributor, hence I should be able to trust them as a manager, or I trust them most as a manager as far as that's concerned. Except the skills that it takes as an individual contributor are vastly different from the skills that it takes to be a manager. You're literally looking at and for different things.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, let's go back to the old system, the cog in the machine system. Cog in the machine system is everybody in a company exists to generate profit or results for the client and nothing else. The ecosystem suggests that there's a third dimension, and that third dimension is to grow the team, right? The personal professional development of the team is the third output, the third dimension that needs to be grown. So there's more going on, isn't there?
Well, the other thing is that people think that the boss employee from the 20th century model, cogs in a machine, that's always the way management's been. It's not. Before that, we had something too, like in the 1800s, in the 19th century, and before that, I mean, there was management based on, like, I'm the boss, you have to listen to me. That kind of dynamic's always been there as sort of a power play. But functionally, management pre 20th century was based on the apprenticeship model. Okay. Yeah. So you're the master, I'm the student. You teach me what you know, and my job is to learn. And you've developed that credibility based on the fact that you're really good at what you do and you're willing to work with me and help me learn. And it was only when the whole notions of assembly lines came in, that this whole thing shifted. So instead of a journeyman teaching me things, as the apprentice, having me work on 6 different things, what happens is that, when you're on an assembly line, if you have 20 different people, each with their apprentices, each looking in their way of doing things, you end up with a lumpy assembly line. Whereas it works for apprenticeship, you need, so instead of having one person learn 6 things, you have 6 people who each do one thing. And so as a result, I get consistency in the result. And the only people that actually saw the whole picture were the managers, and they'd be tightly held that information. And that's why they call it command and control, because they were commanding what to be done, but they would control the information. They wouldn't share the information, because otherwise people would start to work around them and try their own different ideas. And it just didn't work very well in an assembly line thing. Even if it worked on this part of the line, it wouldn't work on this part over here. And what happens is the outputs of this part of the line end up with inputs for the next part, which don't actually work. So functionally, that's why it came. And it's only been in the 20th century that was there. But we think that it's always been there because it's been there for longer than our life.
It's even, when I'm thinking back to some of the great reading that I've done, when you go back even further to, the great philosophers, and even you go back further in terms of the Vedas, like ancient texts. In fact, the greatest teachers were valued differently than the greatest performers. And in fact, the greatest teachers were the people who were able to teach other people to do great things in the world, or perform music, or perform in the arts, or think great thoughts, or whatever the case might be. But they were able to inspire others in doing it. May not have been the best performers themselves, but they were known and became respected for their ability to teach, not for their ability to do.
Correct. And in a fast-paced world, one of the things that happened, and it started happening in about 1970, is as technology became a larger and larger part of our world, one of the side effects of that is that the seasonality of time started to slip away. Okay,
explain what you mean by that. I know what you mean, but I think someone's listening on the seasonality. What are you talking about?
Well, here's the thing.
It sounds very theoretical, but it's not.
Everything had a season. I mean, look at the plants. They, in the springtime, everything blooms. In the summertime, they shine. In the fall, it starts to, you see the coloring changing the leaves. That's because the leaves are dying. I mean, in the wintertime, it's basically socked in, and in many places, and of course in Canada, we see this more in other places, but also Northern Europe, there's snow involved. Okay. Well, trees are asleep at that time. They're not dead. And here's how we can tell. In the next spring, they get buds again. So there's this whole season ebb and flow. In fact, there's a season, there's a cadence to how the human body works. I mean, we wake up in the morning, we get fuel in the morning with our breakfast, and then we go through our day. What I've been told is that about 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when we tend to be at a low energetically, and then we pick back up again in the afternoon and into the evening, and then we go to sleep as far as that's concerned. So there's these cycles of our cadence of our energy. There's cycles in the planet on the energy, all that stuff. And yes, that is very theoretical, but businesses ran with that too. You had high seasons, low seasons, you had a bunch of different things like that. With the advent of computer technology, things shifted from being seasonal to being linear. So in other words, what happened was it compressed time. And so people found that there's more to do because of the fact that you can do more. People expect you to do more. And so what happens was that there's these time crunches that occur. And as a result, people tend to get, it was interesting because people end up getting higher stress, and they're more interested for the need for that productivity, as far as that's concerned, to stay competitive. And one of the casualties of that was this notion of accountability. Accountability has actually been sort of thrashed, and now it's misunderstood, from the way it was before.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little.
Okay, so I get my first job, out of school, let's say, okay, and I'm in, I don't know, whatever profession you want to pick me in. And so what happens is I learn how to generate a result, and then I'm accountable to generate a result. And so what happens is that I can stand accountable for generating that result as an individual contributor in the company. And if I'm really good at that, then the boss makes me a manager. And then what the boss does is says, now your job is to hold these other people to account, to actually make sure that you're now accountable for everybody's result, not just yours. Okay? But if I'm accountable for everybody's result, and I've heard the term hold people accountable, and we use that all the time. And frankly, it's a bunch of BS.
Yeah, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that you can hold anybody accountable.
No, to hold somebody accountable would require a level of control over another human being that you don't have, short of threats and coercion.
Correct. And it sets the onus in the wrong place, right?
Correct.
I think instead, accountability is an outcome of a transparent, supportive ecosystem that grows your people, right? If your people are willing to come to you with their challenges as they're trying to develop results, then you've got a true apprenticeship model where you're growing your people. And if you're growing your people in a way that they want to be grown, then all the better.
Well, the other side of this is if I was accountable as an individual to generate results, now that I'm a manager, why am I accountable for a larger set of results? Like, what happens to my people? They're no longer accountable?
Yeah, exactly.
No, they're accountable too. It's like, hang on a second. So I can either hold people accountable, which is the misnomer that people use, or I can actually treat people as the people who are accountable. You see, when I got promoted to management, whoever's taking my role is accountable for their results. So as opposed to actually, you see, this whole notion of an ecosystem sounds like it's a big deal. And in some ways it is, but it's not as hard as people realize or as they think. As a manager, I'm not accountable for everybody's results.
No.
My accountability is to support people. They're accountable for the specific results. My job is to support them so that they have what they need to do that. So that's different than being accountable for the result, because to be accountable for the actual result, I actually have to control them, and I don't. Yet,
or you have to take over the task.
Well,
which makes no sense, because that's not the job.
Well, at the same time, if you look at our little napkin, okay, so what you've got there is the manager. You see, the people are actually accountable for the results. The manager's job is to support the people. Now, what happens if I've got some skill deficiencies or I've got different things there? Well, notice that the manager is also an individual, and he or she will actually develop their own results in addition to that. And sometimes those results are backstopping where there's a shortage on the team. So I
Yep.
might step in and do this piece, or I might step in and do that piece because of the fact that I know. Or I could have my own specialty within the larger organization. So sometimes they do backstop people as far as that's concerned. Yet this is also where managers get confused because they're like, well, okay, so what they do is I know how to do my job. I know how to do it really well, and I'm really good at it. And that's where I get my energy from, is when people really appreciate the great work I do. Then I'll just tell the people to do things my way because it worked for me, so it must work for them. And we have a word or a term for that. Okay. And the term is called one world delusion. Like, people think there's only one world rather than 7.9 billion iterations of it.
Right.
Okay? So how many kids you got? You got what, three
Three.
kids? Three kids. Okay. And their ages?
18, 16, 14.
Okay. So let's look at your 18-year-old and your 14-year-old. Do they really experience the world the same way?
Oh gosh, no.
Like, completely differently, don't they? Any
Completely
14-year-old and any 18, they're
Completely.
just, yeah. So you could claim it's the same way. So fine, technically they'll stand on the same driveway when they're in front of your place. Yet their experience, even of the driveway, will be different.
Absolutely.
So like, if there's a basketball hoop at the end and one likes basketball and the other one doesn't, that's like that's an unneeded thing, and the other person thinks that's a great instrument. So like, we literally, the 18-year-old drives, I bet,
Yeah.
and the 14-year-old clearly doesn't yet. His age to drive is 16.
Better not.
Exactly, but there's two completely different worlds, aren't they?
Right.
So there are 7.9 billion iterations of the world, and for most people,
8.62, actually.
oh, is it that high now?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So the bottom line, though, is everybody has their own perspective on it. And
8.062. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say 8.6. That's a big jump.
Big jump. No. 8.062.
Okay.
I misspoke.
So 8.1 billion. There's my rounding. And like an entrepreneur, I always round a little bit up.
Little up.
Yeah, you talk about up when you're talking about your revenues and stuff. At least that's my experience of the entrepreneurs I meet. Everybody's got a different perspective. So there is not one world. So you can't just do things the way I do them, because while it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so if you actually look, you see, and part of the place where there's confusion is because I'm also accountable for individual results. What's happening is that I'll actually do that, and I just tell them to follow my way. And so so the question is, okay, so if I was to look at this strategically and not just say, oh, well, you have to be good to your people, and that sounds like such well-intended, misguided drivel that most people dismiss it. And my attitude is, I want a manager to be strategic about the support of their people. So in order to do that, there's actually 4 things that the manager needs to do.
Okay.
So the first thing is to get to know their people to the point of understanding what makes them tick. Okay. This means learning their strengths. How do I tap their strengths? Learning their weak spots. How do I avoid those? Because if I have people working at their weak spots, I just don't get as much from them. It's like, if I'm left-handed, if I had to write with my right hand every day, you're going to get less productivity out of me. If I can write with my left-handed, then my notes are going to come down a lot faster. So tap the strengths, avoid the weak spots, how they prefer to work with other people. If I can work with my people in ways that they prefer to work with other people, my teams just run more smoothly, And so
and that goes back to one of those traits that we talked about in the last napkin, which was flexibility, right? Flexibility. Good bosses are flexible.
Yeah,
bad bosses are seen as being inflexible.
Correct. And that's just, in my opinion, that's just short-sighted. So it's not like good bosses are these altruistic humans that sing Kumbaya a lot. What they are is strategists who understand people and human behavior. And if they can actually tap human behavior and realize, you know what, I can either work with my people, or I can decide that things should go this way, and work with my shoulds, which are moral imperatives, either imposed on yourself or imposed on others. And they're just not very pretty.
No,
So, people spend a lot of time shooting all over themselves and each other's, and it's just kind of smelly.
no, that doesn't work.
So that's one thing they need to do, is to really get to know their people and understand what makes them tick. The second thing
Mhm.
they need to do is to support the individual growth of people based on understanding each team member. Okay. And this is where those career development growth plans come in, because if I overlay those onto a person's job, I'm actually speaking to them in terms that they understand and appreciate. They feel understood for what they're trying to accomplish, and because the job is the to-dos or the tasks that actually give them that growth plan, I get the job done while focusing on their growth as far as that's concerned. So when I'm looking at the individual growth of each person, absolutely do that. Make sure that I've got the growth plan and I'm aligning the job. Now, the third thing I need to do, obviously, is grow the team and support the employees in the skills and habits needed to effectively work together so that they can generate the collective outcomes, not just their individual results. And that's when remember we talked about the social contract. That's where number
Mhm.
two in the social contract is so important. It's work together to generate collective client results, but also professional training and growth to support people, not just with their individual results, but with their team results as well. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the fourth thing that I'm doing as a manager is to nurture the evolution of the company's culture within the team. So, it's an extension of this whole notion of stronger culture. But here's the thing, and it's also an extension of the teamwork. The better I have them working with each other, the more they feel like they have each other's backs, they will bring a different level of accountability to the table. And strategically, this just works better. It's easier for the employees to accomplish. And frankly, this is the stuff of high performance teams.
And this is also why we break big organizations into teams, because teams are agile and can execute in different directions more quickly, shifting along the way, versus the whole organization is difficult to move, right?
Well, that's half of it. The other half of it is it allows me to avoid competency frameworks. You see, if the teams are hard, clients and customers pay for results. They come to you because they want a result that your people provide through whatever it is that their deliverable is. They give the clients and customers access to a result. The teams can be designed around results. So it's very focused, very specific. If I actually can manage with and through teams, I'm in a situation I can keep my focus on the results, because that's what the clients pay for. That's what we can get the profit from. And that's how we can afford to continue the professional growth. And where's the professional growth? Specifically in their ability to generate the results. If I
Mm.
go to competency frameworks, everybody at a level 4 has to achieve these 7 things. Well, what if somebody's good at 2 or 3 of them and they're not so good at 2 or 3 of them? That means I have to have people working as much time on things that they're not as good at as the things they are good at. And all I'm going to do is drain energy from my ability to generate those results. And because people will do what pays them more. And so if
Yeah.
competencies are my focus, then I go for competencies. If I can keep them in teams working on complementary strengths and actually help them build their careers in terms that matter to them, I'm in a situation where I really am focused on them, yet at the same time I'm focused on the same results orientation that allows people to actually prosper. They not only survive, they grow and they prosper.
So one of the things that we talked about again in our previous napkin was this idea that good bosses are considered to be transparent. But I also think that, you know, part of this is by being transparent, by bringing that forward. One of the things that comes out of this evolution is a transparency from the people, from the team, backward, upward in the organization. And that's really where the opportunity for growth happens. But it is final pillar, because if you're growing the team, they want to have that, because they're growing in the direction that they want to grow. They know that you're interested in that kind of growth. They know that the individual growth is being supported, and they understand, you know, they understood that they're understood. They're seen. They're seen by their people. They're seen by their team. They're seen by their boss, right? And if those things exist, people can volunteer for accountability. People can volunteer to be accountable. You can't hold them accountable, but they can certainly volunteer and say, "This is where I'm at."
Well, you see, here's the thing. they are accountable. If you don't show up for a few days, you no longer have a place there. There are consequences to everything you do. If you show up early and you're working hard and you actually make a difference and you're generating more results, again, there's consequences, and those are much more interesting than the other ones. So they're always accountable. The key is not to worry about holding them accountable. What if I held them as accountable? What if I treat you as somebody who's accountable and I partner with you in your accountability?
Mm-hmm.
See, because if I'm partnering with you in your accountability, that's there. And by the way, there's this whole notion about transparency and what I should have in most people misunderstand transparency. Transparency is not opening and laying bare all your stuff. It doesn't mean showing them your P&L if that's not what you're interested in doing. What it does mean is if I actually ask for something, or if I, want to head in a direction, to share the thinking why, and think, in other words, give them the thinking involved and work with them, as opposed to actually just imposing something without sharing any reasons why or any rationale or anything like that. So if I have enough power of influence, people will accept it. And if not, then we debate it and we'll sort it out together, because they see the dynamics that are behind something. And as a result, they're part of and can get included in having input in the decision, even if they're not making it. And that is transparency that anybody can get behind, as opposed
Absolutely.
to transparency called, open up all your books for everybody. That's not what this means at all.
No, it means sharing why something's important. Now,
Sure.
I want to get somebody's listening to this right now and they're looking at this going, wait a minute, managers have as individuals have results that they backstop their people with. That sounds a little bit like reverse delegation, where people just are sloughing stuff backwards to the leader. You're not saying that. You're saying something different.
I need 5 people for my job. I've got 3 people that showed up today. One person's sick, and I'm perpetually short one person because head office is trying to get me another body. You know what? Sometimes you roll up your sleeves and you're doing part of the job. So am I doing their job for them? No, they're accountable for their own jobs, but that doesn't mean they're accountable for jobs that I haven't supported. I mean, keep in mind that part of the job of the manager is accountable just like any other team member is for their part of it. And they either bring a special expertise to the table, or they bring the ability to fill in the blanks when the team just doesn't have it, or if somebody's going
Right.
through a learning curve. So it's more about that than it is anything else, which leads to a different thing when you're looking at sizes of teams and things like that, and whether I use my expertise or whether I'm just supporting the team. One of the questions that everybody asks is, well, how many people is the right people to manage? Have you ever thought of that?
I've thought of it. Yeah.
Okay, do you have an answer?
I don't think it's one size fits all.
Actually, I have a definitive answer.
Okay.
Okay. It depends.
I'm
So it's
pretty
not
sure.
one size fits all, but here's the thing. The number
No.
of people to manage is as many people as you can meet one-on-one with for 15 to 20 minutes every week, week in, week out. So that if that's 2 people, because I'm doing so much stuff as a specialist, then the number that's right for me to manage is 2. If it's 8 people, because of the fact that I'm actually don't have separate stuff that I'm doing or some very small stuff, it could be 8. I mean, I've seen situations where people could run with 12 people and it starts to get really hairy at that point. But at the same time, I've seen people do that. Now, a lot of people say, well, I meet with my people in a stand-up every morning. They could meet as a group, and so that should do it. It's like, actually, no.
No.
Um, the thing about one-on-one is every person needs to be seen and heard, and they need to do it individually. It was interesting because Marcus Buckingham did a bunch of research on this piece too. And what they found was that if somebody was meeting with their boss once a week, and we're not talking about a half an hour, we're not talking about an hour, they were doing 10 or 15-minute connections. But it's like, how's it going? How did your last week go? What do you got coming up for this week? Have you hit any stumbling blocks? How can I support you? I mean, literally 3 or 4 questions that just keep them connected. And the reason, and what they found is if somebody was meeting that much time, okay, again, 10, 15 minutes once a week, one-on-one, not in groups, what they found was that on average, productivity went up by 13%.
Yeah.
If they
And
met
there's
once,
a dramatic cutoff though.
well,
Like
here's
there's a
what we,
dramatic reduction when you go to once a month.
well, no, if
Dramatic
you go
reduction.
to every 3 weeks, it was 5%.
Yeah.
decrease in production, not over no contact at all.
Yeah.
Because when it's once a week, and they found that even every other week still didn't do the trick. If it's once a week, people need support in real time. So if I know that my meeting with my boss is on Tuesday afternoons, and something comes up on a Monday and I couldn't get through to the boss, I could connect on Tuesday and we can sort the stuff out while it's still small. If I actually have if it waits 2 weeks or 3 weeks, what happens is this is no longer about the day-to-day stuff. This is no longer real time. This is checking up on me. And when I feel like you're checking up on me, whether it's once every 3 weeks, once every 2 weeks, or even once a month, it's like this is not for my benefit, it's for yours, because I'm not getting any benefit from it. I had to figure out what I needed to figure out, on the 3rd of the month, because you're not available till the 15th.
Yeah. So here's the other thing that you're not saying. And I'm such a big fan of these weekly rhythms, and I think it's so important and so overlooked. It's also not random. Like the meeting, the one-on-ones aren't random. They're scheduled. They're happening every week. It's regular, unless somebody is on vacation or dead. Dead's a good excuse, but vacation is a good excuse too. So if people are away, fine. But if they're not away, this is happening on the same schedule every single week without fail. And do you have an agenda that you recommend around that? What do you believe should be in that meeting?
It's different for different people, because here's the thing. Some people really want to be seen and acknowledged for what they contribute. Other people would actually show you active disdain if you focused on how well they did. Instead, what they want to do is focus on their people. So if you really appreciate feeling appreciated for the work you do, I would look at what you're doing this past week. What have you got coming up, and what are the things I can acknowledge you about? If you're the second type with it, really, where you get your energy is the development with your team, then what I might do, I might not talk about you at all. I'd say, listen, is there anything? No, I'm good. But I'd say, I notice that your people are really stepping up. What's happening? And then they'll talk about their people, and they actually feel acknowledged in that, because they care about their people, and by supporting somebody in their care for their people, or in acknowledging the growth and development of their people, or even helping them with the trouble spot with one of their people, that's what actually supports that person. So it really does vary by the person. But here's the other side of it. Instead of doing these things like once a year, twice a year, you're in a situation where just by connecting them with these little mini doses, you have 52 chances to get it right.
Yeah,
or after, let's say somebody has 4 weeks vacation, you still have 48 chances to get it right. So the truth is, you get better at supporting people when you've done it lots, frequently, as far as that's concerned. So the good news is that this is one of those that, even if you don't know how to do it or what kinds of questions to ask, you'll figure it out.
And start small. Start small.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them what they need. Ask them what's going on, right? And being flexible to someone else's behavior is part of it again, right? And here's that transparency word again. Say, hey, I want to meet to help you achieve what you want to do in your role. So what's that look like this week? Right.
Well, some people will go, I don't need your help to do that. So what I may have to do with somebody else is go, okay, so I know you don't need for me to help you on your role, but I got to tell you, my job is to coordinate what you're doing with the other people. I need to get feedback from you so that I can make sure the rest of it's going. Are you willing to do that to help out? Oh, yeah. For you, no problem. I'd be happy to do that. But don't tell me it's for me, don't you know? And so it's really different for different people.
Right. And if you go to bat, you might just get a hit, right? You gotta show up.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Big thanks to Michael Walsh for another powerful chapter in our Freedom by Design series. Michael, your clarity on what great managers actually do and how results multiply when people grow lands every time. Before you bounce back into your day, notice what stood out for you and how you might apply it this week. Here's some highlights that you may want to carry forward. Managers multiply. Doers plateau. Scale comes from building capability in others, not by adding more to your own plate. Accountability is a partnership. Create clear agreements and cadence so ownership lives with the adult doing the work. Coach the person, not the role. Personal operating manuals beat one-size-fits-all playbooks. Bring back apprenticeship. Shadow, assist, own, teach. This process turns work into a classroom. Redesign the manager calendar. Aim most of your time at one-on-ones, coaching, feedback, and systems that enable your team to win. As you imagine your week, you might find yourself making one small shift, blocking a one-on-one, rewriting an agreement, or handing off something you've been holding, because you know results grow through people. Your challenge: on a napkin, write the name of one person you'll grow this week and the single capability you'll transfer to them. Snap a photo and share it with them, and share it with us at #PaperNapkinWisdom. I'd love to see what you choose. And if this episode helped you think differently, follow, rate, leave a short review. It really does help more leaders find these conversations, and share this with a manager who's ready to scale without burning out. And tag us so we can cheer them on. Remember, this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, where a simple sketch can change how you lead. Until next time, keep turning small ideas into big results, and make it a great day.